Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another session in the 7 Stages of Life put on by the Beezone with Frank Marrero and myself, Ed Reether, the founder of Beezone. And if you've been following it with us, we've had the first 4 stages of life that we've covered in the series of the 7 stages. And tonight's talk or discussion or consideration will be on the 5th stage of life, which is more of what we might call the esoteric part of spirituality.
And for much time, it's been what spirituality was, going up to the visions and all that visionary and blissful experiences has been what people said, this is spirituality.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, that was not a common language or a common course of a discourse of society, the esoteric parts of spirituality. More, the cultural parts would be more religious and ceremonial and things we talked about in the earlier stages of life.
Right.
But now we're speaking about more of what might be called the esoteric or the secret,
right,
if you will,
yes.
or the closed.
Or secret, closed not in the sense of opposite of open, closed in the sense of sacred literally means to be set apart, away from just the common evaluation. So secret in the sense that it is sacred.
So the word itself, if I'm not mistaken, the 5th stage of life, according to Adi Da, is about the higher evolution of the not only nervous system, but the evolutionary part of the human anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
And also it has to do with what's traditionally called mysticism.
Mysticism, higher brain phenomena, higher brain understandings.
And so the word itself, mysticism,
mm-hmm.
refers to that exactly what you were referring to, the
right, the
mysteries.
Mystay was is the Greek word, which means someone who's been initiated. But it meant, the word is from myo, meaning to close or to keep secret. Closed in the sense, like I say, it's not closed in the sense of closure, but in the sense of sacred setting. Let's set apart this sacredly, so that it's not open to common or secular or vulgar interpretation.
Which can just debase everything.
It debases it
to a common denominator.
Right, which is which can't understand it.
Right, or take it to be like a fight to we're all enlightened and
or
we're all happy.
All you have to do is breathe really fast and look in.
Well, one thing we have to understand is that if you follow with the full 7-stage teachings of Adi Da and refer to the great traditions and the literature that's associated with the 5th stage of life, we're not talking about a common experiential stage. We may be speaking about states and stages here, and so I wanted to get a little bit into the difference, because a lot of people feel themselves to be in this kind of ecstatic
or mystic, or having a mystic experience.
I go to the beach and I see a sunset, and
and there's an exaltation, and it's true. Exaltations do trigger these higher, and you feel as higher, as we've used the word, that it does trigger these exaltations, these ecstasies of different kinds, which we'll get into, do trigger that evolutionary urge that goes up, and you feel you have a mystic experience. You have, and some people have what we call traditional spiritual experiences. But the difference, we have to again remember the difference between state and stage. What we're talking about is the 5th stage of life. There, in the 5th stage of life, there are a host of common experiences that we may experience even in our earlier stages. So it's a temporary experience. That would be a state. So we can have these 5th stage type states, exaltations, mystic absorptions, in ordinary and extraordinary parts. But what Ken Wilber talks about relative to the state, it's a guiding. It's not just like, oh, we have this experience, now I've seen God. It's not just that. There is a guiding orientation that is given to you. So you have these mystic and mystical and ascended or yogic experiences and states. And then when you're come down or not in that anymore, you still remember it. You go, oh, no, I want to orient my life in that direction. So it does serve. There is a positive aspect to the state, but what we're talking about is something different.
Right, and we're talking about something very developed, because it's not, it isn't common, because there are there's lots of literature about people and cultures who have developed a certain level of evolution, and it's people like Ramakrishna and people of the higher
Muktananda
and Upasani Baba and
Meher Baba.
Meher Baba. These are great saints and sages
and yogis. Your yogis, we have going back to our fourth stage of life, those would be saints in common reference. The fifth stage, you generally refer to them as mystics and yogis.
Right.
The sixth stage, which we'll talk about in the next class, is the sage. So that delineation between saint, yogis, and sage. Mystics also fit in that fifth stage category.
Because there is the yogic phenomenon associated with the fifth stage, which is more of the subtle energy. It's
the higher nervous system, and the nervous system has an energy that goes up, and you can experience it sexually, and that's what the tantra would be, how you would take the low energy of sexuality and run it up the nervous system, so to speak, to higher mystical experiences. Kundalini, in one of the traditional Kundalini practices was to sit on a pile of shit, because they would say you would sit there and that smell would awaken the energies all at the bottom. So that was actually a common yogic trigger for Kundalini experiences. So it is based in the nervous system.
And so
and rises to the top, as it were.
So in the tradition, the various yogas that are associated with the fifth stage of life are not only Kundalini yoga, the Shab yoga, the yoga of sound, because now you're talking about higher centers of the brain. So yogas associated with light, Kriya yoga, which is the sound of the chant of the name of the sound of things.
Well, this begs our question that where does all this lead? And there is a highest, so to speak, center that these are all going to. You listen to the Shab Yoga and you follow it into the core of the brain. You bring the body energy, either Kundalini or Tantric, and it goes up to the core of the brain. And you do the Shab Yogas and even Kriya Yogas, which follows attention to the core of the brain. So there is the pathways to this upper terminus.
Right, and so that he speaks about, Adi Da speaks about in The Enlightenment of the Whole Body, which is an excellent book to reference in this study of the esoteric anatomy, is that he talks about the peripheral nervous system moving to the central nervous system, to the channels, which is within the spinal cord, up through the heart and into the throat and up into the lower brain and then into the midbrain, because we're speaking about midbrain as it relates to mid-heart. So this is the intelligence of what we're speaking about. This has been purified.
The lower life.
Right. So you're no longer...
And you're stable in the heart.
And you're stable in the heart. So
in ordinary loving, sorry.
Yeah. No, go right ahead. And so what I wanted to talk a little bit about the roots of the fifth stage in
historical terms.
And I think as Adi Da speaks a lot about, is the shamanism, which is the ancient ways in which the fifth stage has its roots in shamanism, and as shamanism moved into yoga, where the plants and the elemental world that sparks a lot of these experiences can then be these external elements are now found within the nervous system of the body. And so yoga then has now developed from shamanism, and now the yoga of India basically is the roots of what we're speaking about, that have developed this yoga, which is now expanded into what Adi Da says is the seventh stage. So we're just speaking about the historical fifth stage here.
And back to the shamanism, this is presuming a mature fourth stage orientation. And then because when one is mature in love, even for a breath, then there's a natural rise. You want to share, you want to tell people about it, which would be then the opening of the heart, of the throat. So this rise, natural rise, is not a strategic rise. That would still be a third stage orientation to it. Oh yeah, I'm feeling love. Oh yeah, I can go up. No, it's a resting process rather than a strategic process. And that in that rest in the heart intuition, there is a throat naturally opens. In other words, you want to share, you want to rapture, you want to rave, and so the throat opens, and there is a natural rise out of the heart, not out of the heart, the heart's thrill, and it goes up to the ajna door, and this is why the Hindi, the tilak, the tilak or at the bindu, or the symbol of the highest point of the nervous system, is on in the bodies, on the gurus, on the women of this higher point. So it is, this shamanism starts rising, and they start to see the mind of the world, as they would call it. And so, but it does have a rise. Now, as it developed historically, the yogis then took this and made it an art and science.
Right. And so, as Frank was mentioning, is that this part of the anatomy of the being is rested. The third stage stuff.
Harmonization work is done.
This is done, and so the natural life force energy rises up, and the fifth stage is characterized is the penetration of the knot of the ajna door, or the door to the guru, or the door to the light. This is penetrated because what you will soon discover, even if you try to bypass and go from first, second stage to try to get up the channels.
You can masturbate You can masturbate this fifth center just like you can masturbate any center.
It's centered and starts with that. Right. And we're not speaking. We're speaking about starting with a resting place, a fullness.
Well, yeah, I'm reminded of beloved saying. He's repeating Jesus' words, "I stand at the door and knock." And he says, "I stand at the door and knock." So he's calling. There's a calling up, and that's the door. He said this is the door that he stands at and knocks.
And then the responsibility for the yogi or the fifth stage practitioner is to be responsible for the knot at the ajna door, to have that penetrated by the guru.
Right. You don't penetrate it. You answer the call.
Right, because there's the
him.
What the fifth stage refers to is the subtle life force energy.
Good saying.
Which is beyond thought, which is beyond
all the avenues, sound,
perceptions,
the
lower brain phenomena that we associate with these kinds of horizontal planes of materiality, and
that's why it has to be secret. That's why that's what you're having it closed off from the ordinary parlance conversation.
Because the reasons why it's closed off, because of the design of it, is because unless this is open, this kind of energy can be manipulated by the lower elements of the navel, and then that's where it gets corrupted, and ego, and the madness, and the insanity of the power of what's inherent in the being of everybody is contaminated and used in what would be called the underbelly, the devil, whatever. It's really the Narcissus, the pig in the navel, will use this kind of energy for its own narcissistic, power-driven, madness-motivated.
And you get addicted to it, and as that, and then it becomes an addiction. Notice that when people have a sexual orgasm, they close their eyes and look in, because there is this, because the evolutionary urge of the body rises, and it rises up to a point, and that point is the ajna door, and you go, you come here, you come here up to here, so. So there is this natural ascending energy of the body. It is, and as it goes to the higher brain, we call that fifth stage phenomena. But we're talking about not fifth stage states or experiences. Yes, because they are guiding, orienting principles. We do want to grow in that fullness to where we can rest in that, not strategically, as you point out, but by response ability. So this ajna door, this natural rise, and it is the terminus of this evolutionary urge. We have this evolution. We want to rise to the heavens. That's why it's up, not because of the stars. There's this natural rise in the evolutionary esoteric anatomy of the body-mind, and this is all the urges of the body terminate or fulfilled when that opens.
In that rise, there is in a way, if you wanted to use a vertical kind of a metaphor here, is you have to leave these centers, all right? So if you're attached to the body, because really what we're speaking about here is transcendence of mind in the lower form, of identity, and of body, because now you're leaving what you believe to be yourself.
The real, yeah, real.
The form of this, which sits itself here in the vital centers and associated with the lower mind of thinking. All of these things must be left behind. So in this whole process, there is a death process or a leaving behind process that has associated itself with fears and sorrows of leaving behind who you love and all of the identities and all the attachments. You must now be purified in that sense. So this isn't just like I'm going to the beach and see you later, Mom. You know, this is leaving any of that stuff. And
the onset of the first languaging of this understanding, when they first started realizing that there was, in language terms and in concrete description of this higher world, these higher experiences, these higher stages, then they would reject those lower ones. In the purification and the harmonization, one of the strategies would be to reject it. Well, the rejection is a natural process of any evolute. You always reject what's below. But then the maturity of that evolute, of that next stage, is that you then reintegrate it. So when people started having spiritual experiences, some of the first language was anti-body, anti-sex, and anti-women. The signature of immature religious and spiritual thought is to be anti-body, anti-sex, and therefore anti-women, generally. Because just what you're saying, you do have to harmonize and purify the attachments and the embedded orientation of the lower life.
In love.
When you do that in love, then you can still have the body, be sexual, be all the things that we are in that context. But there is also another context, and we don't have to reject those.
And be drawn up by what would be traditionally called the mother, or the Shakti, which is, if you read Atma Nadi Shakti of Adi Da, his description of the fifth stage is in that book. So you would want to read Atma Nadi Shakti.
Which is in the Aletheon.
Right, and it's a book by itself. But he speaks about this kind of ascension, and the fifth stage is all about ascension. And the word and the samadhi associated with the fifth stage is nirva kalpa samadhi, which is moving from this kind of object-oriented kalpa samadhi, which is object-oriented, to bliss-oriented, because now you're being raised up above, rarefied into light, into bliss, into ecstasy. Yeah? So now there's the natural movement into the brain core. Not just the ajna door, which is the bindu here. The ajna door, in terms of Adi Da's teaching, is more the full top of the whole brain. So it moves, because he's always saying up, 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 to the back, to the back, to the back, because he's talking about what you're moving to is the shushumna, the top and beyond the brain core. So you're still in the fifth stage, you're still in the brain core. And the back goes to the front, the pineal gland. So you're...
your conversation we had with me earlier, where you were saying we have to be careful not to be oriented when talking about the fifth stage orientation. That Adi Da describes this as a profoundly mature relaxation within the divine condition. So please address that again.
Well,
it's the seventh stage, where it's a moment in the seventh stage unfolding.
Right, because what you have to understand is that all of this stuff is supremely attractive, supremely ecstatic, or
compelling,
absorbed. And if one is in the fifth stage, higher bliss samadhi, attention will be absorbed in that, and attention just will be sublimed by that. And all of a sudden, if you don't have the seventh stage orientation, you forget who's blissful, who's watching, who's experiencing. And so Adi Da continually reminds us, or any practitioner who is in the meditative state, that there is still a conditioned state here. There is this place of, you're still not in the perfect state. You are being drawn, and you have glimpses, and you have moments.
You have baptisms.
You have all ecstasy, so to see.
But it's kalpa.
It's
a time. Nirva kalpa.
Nirva kalpa. Bliss in time.
Right.
Or form. Not object, because we're speaking about getting close to causal. We're getting close, because you have intuitions of causal, formless samadhi. But we're still in form samadhi. We're still in time.
There's still a time. It doesn't last.
Right. And it may go for, he says to observe somebody in a fifth stage samadhi, you may appear to be dead. Breath may be limited.
Or suspended.
Yogis can be buried for days. Go to the Kumbh Mela, and you can see yogis who can be put in the ground with sealed containers and no air for days, because they can be in suspended states of samadhi, beyond body. And now, one of the things we have to understand, that the fifth stage work here is not out of body. This is not an out-of-body experience.
Although it's traditionally, or casually referred to that way.
Right. Because what you're doing is that you're moving this physical form into a subtle form. And you're actually not going anywhere. You're being...
It reminds me, one night, Beloved was talking to us, and he said, you're going to die, and you'll rise, and you'll have all these experiences, and you'll see the light, and you'll think, oh my God, there's the light, and you'll just look at the light, and you'll be adoring the light forever and ever. And he says, you may be there for 25,000 years in beholding the light. And then someone opens the door, and you're in a closet the whole time looking at a light bulb. So it's not that in and of itself, the fifth stage orientation is limited.
Right. Not not to
put it down.
Not to put it down. As he says, you guys don't understand, when I was with Muktananda, or I had settled experience with Neem Karoli Baba, this is a powerful kind of experience, a world that has great power to it and great wisdom and insight to your nature. So
right, this is a deep and high intuition of our real condition, which as Beloved pointed out in the Paradox of Instruction, this samadhi, this bliss state that you can sustain or be sustained by for periods, nirvikalpa, however long that is realization, is the same samadhi, is the same bliss as the seventh stage. It's just held in place. Yes. It is held in place by the mechanisms of the body-mind and the condition of the body-mind that has been purified, that you can then be held for a time, even a long time, in the actual true bliss state of divine reality.
Right.
So of course people have always thought it to be God, because it is, except it's only temporary. Kalpa, nirvikalpa. There's only a short time. So it is the realization, the higher terminus of the nervous system is divine realization for a time.
And I think the shortest amount of time that I've ever heard Adi Da talk about nirvikalpa samadhi was during the 1975 Cincinnati Reds World Series.
That's right. That's right.
Where the outfielder made this spectacular catch
to win
the game. And it was just a moment in the game of the World Series. And he says, that's nirvikalpa samadhi.
That's samadhi. Don't let anybody ever tell you it's not. It just only lasts that long. And it takes all these things are holding it in place. You have to be the catcher that wins the game on the seventh game, on the last out, all those things. And you're going, yes! And what do people do? They don't go yes like this when they're really that. They go yes, they go up. And so that point...
The high five.
High five. High five. Cute.
The move,
fifth stage, high five.
All ecstasy.
Yeah.
All ecstasy.
True. It's real. It's real.
Up. Mm-hmm. It's all ascending.
And ascended. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, this has not been purified.
Mm.
This has not been purified. And it is only purified by love. So when we're speaking about
fifth stage
phenomenon, you can get into a moment, you can take LSD.
You can start seeking.
You can take LSD. I think there's a whole culture that, at least we grew up in, that woke up to this possibility.
Right. And again, it's a temporary state. And Adi Da points out that these drug experiences are authentic fifth stage phenomena, just like masturbation is an authentic sexual experience. But there's the difference. You have to understand the difference between, yes, it is authentic, but as long as you understand the difference between masturbation and making love, you understand the difference between authentic fifth stage experiences via drugs and fifth stage experiences via the responsible harmonization and ascension in spiritual terms. Mm-hmm. It's still the orientation of states inspire us to live in the right way. So these fifth stage phenomena that happen via drug use or substances, external stimulants, it's the real thing.
Well, I was reminded one night I had Ram Dass over for dinner. My wife is a dear friend of Ram Dass's. And we were talking about this, and he described his initial, and for many years, understanding of spirituality. He called it vertical schizophrenia.
I like that.
Because what he kept on thinking was that it was always going up, to the light, going up. And Trungpa, at the same period of time, was always saying, hey, smoke your Marlboros, get your leather belt on, get your little shoes back on, and start dealing with the kitchen sink, because in his orientation was more like down here, And so the first year at Naropa Institute was the polarity of the two schools in 1974 of the Hindu love and light, and Trungpa down here with the beer and the women and the Marlboro cigarettes. And that was a very interesting time in the culture, because that's where the polarity immediately spread to those two dichotomies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the schizophrenia that is integrated into this culture, because everybody thinks now you don't even have to do anything, you know.
Right, and the Master Da's grand thesis on the fifth stage phenomena called the Numaton was originally, the working title was Up. And yes, it's up, and no, that's not it. Yeah, you know, so it was up with a question mark. So there is this spiritual schizophrenia of fifth stage orientation that's not seventh stage embrace.
Right.
And so it has a schizophrenia in it if you think that this is the terminus of the evolution. Yes, it is, and no, it's not.
So just a little bit more on that, because the terminus of evolution
mm-hmm.
in the body,
mm-hmm.
so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little
bit? Well, let's look here at this ancient and brilliant symbol of the fifth stage phenomena. This is called this is the esoteric anatomy, as it were, of the nervous system. You have the sushumna, or the spinal line that you feel up. You're going up the sushumna. The two snakes represent the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. They step out from each other and they come together. So there's this male and female dance. So you have this yes and no and do this and that and da 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 in rising harmonies until you come to the esoteric core. This is the pineal, the third eye, the ajna door, and in that you merge in a pulsing singularity. There is a nirvikalpa, a formless, a formlessness of bliss. That's what this is. At that moment, from that grace, Master Da also talks about how then from here the brain light, you can see the ventricles of the brain and they look wing-like. So it's actually the wings of the mystic. In India it's called the swan. In Christian terminology it's the dove. So when the terminus has been of this rising energy has been penetrated and therefore entered, you enter into a formless unity, bliss unity, then there's a winged sense, and it is the ventricles. Master Da talks about, Adi Da talks about the ventricles of the brain being illuminated from that pineal. So this, Master also says, this is the body in its full openness.
Okay.
And so there is, so that's why I say he says this is the upper terminus of all our urges, our laughing, ah, ha, 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 or hey baby, let's go for it. And all these urges, these evolutionary urges, oh, I have a great idea, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do it. And all these ordinary and evolutionary urges we have a finality, have a upper point, and it is bliss, formless bliss. And we can enter that in all these methodologies we've talked about, but that only lasts a time.
Right.
And so only in the seventh stage understanding given by Adi Da can this whole thing be then relaxed in God rather than up.
Right. And that's the key. And Adi Da is the key to understanding this higher evolutionary movement that is inherent in the biology and the evolution of the cosmology.
That's right.
This is not just a bodily-based me orientation. This is in the DNA
of the cosmos.
And when we speak of DNA, it might be an interesting reference at this point to say, how was that DNA discovered? And I believe it was by a
Watson.
Well, Watson
Crick.
Crick
Right.
were working together.
Right.
And they used to take LSD to enhance their thinking capability.
This is way back. This is 53.
53?
Yeah, and so it was part of the experimental when they first discovered LSD, and they were discovering its uses. And so these two scientists were volunteers.
And they were friends with Aldous Huxley. And at that time, it was just coming into the intellectual circles and being studied and also being used by scientists and therapists and drug rehabilitation people. And there's lots of literature on this. And they would use the LSD to enhance their thinking. And it is in one of the experiences that they had that Crick had vision.
Right, and that's because LSD...
And he won the Nobel Peace Prize
for that.
For this.
Yeah, and he didn't tell anybody this until...
No.
This was supposed to be... He waited till it was dead. He said, nobody publishes this till I'm dead. So it's only been recently came out that that's what indeed happened.
Right.
And that's because the holographic vision that the fifth stage affords, you start to see the interconnectedness of... And sometimes even visually see the interconnectedness. There's a great advantage to having a higher perspective. And because LSD does stimulate these kinds of higher centers, it afforded him this vision where it happened. We're not promoting this.
No.
But this is an example of it.
It's an example of what Adi Da says, that this is not a physical world. This is psycho-physical world. And when the fifth stage, and even in the fourth stage we spoke of the last session, is that there is a psychic and a physical kind of relationship to the world. So this is a psychic phenomenon, and one of the things that you realize when you are in that position of the fifth stage is that this is a psychic phenomenon. Mm-hmm. This is not just hard rocks and trees and dirt and struggling to survive. Mm-hmm. This is a psycho-physical universe. Mm-hmm. And it's not in time and space and limited to little Milky Way universes and galaxies and meteorites flying around. And if you have that physical orientation to the world, you continually see the world as a physical manifestation of planets, and you're going to look through telescopes.
This is all third stage myopia. And consider, an aside here, consider the word real. Well, this is real. You know, that third stage orientation's got to be real. The word real is from Latin res, meaning thing. Reification is one of our objectification implications of this word. So we think, well, this is real because it's the thing. Language itself, your linguist will point out to you, is rooted in the body. It has a bodily orientation, always. That's why it makes sense, because it's body.
And we are human.
Right, which is rich earth. So we come up and we get, this is most real. So that whole orientation of real, or physical real, is one of the myopias or slants of language itself, and therefore thought itself. So in the third stage context, you're going to miss a lot, because real is more than thing. Mm-hmm. And real is more than objectification by a subject. So what we're talking about here is we have to come aside from that, make a sacred space, mystery. We have to make a sacred space. Now, if we, in that arena, we can talk a different talk. We understand real is more than thing in the sacred space. And also in sacred space, we can have esoteric practices of all kinds. And this is why it was one of the reasons in the ancient world that the use of psychedelics, for instance in the Mysteries of Eleusis, common one in ancient Greece, it was illegal, so to speak, verboten, to have those outside of the sacred ceremony. Because if you use it secularly or commonly or vulgarly, when you would go through Hades in these processes, if you weren't with a sacred orientation, you could get caught in Hades. And so people that use these drugs in a non-sacred way for entertainment, for my own experience or whatever, you may get caught by the sludge that gets dredged up. So it's
Right.
again, we have to, first of all, the drugs, if there is a sacred, a historical, cultural, sacred use of them, and you go outside that sphere, you might get, you end up in the gutter. Look around. There's lots of people.
You will get caught, because sooner or later the fire, which is what you're dealing with, is not just the light. Is not just the light. The light is a fire, and it burns.
And it burns all that prehistorical, body-based, animal-based urges. That all has to be burned up. And
So all the elements have to be transformed. So the earth element has to be changed to the air element. The air element has to be changed to the fire element. The fire element has to be turned to the ether. And it all is based on devotional, release, surrender, sacrifice.
that's why mystery and mystic is to be set apart, sacred.
Right. Because you don't really fully understand the magnitude of what is our position and our responsibility and who we are. There is a unity, and you don't ever consider yourself to be a separate sense.
User, a manipulator. That's still the secular version of it. And this is a easy trap to fall into when talking about fifth stage, because we think of it as experiences. We think of spiritual experiences that we have. We think of it in that way, and those are fifth stage states, you could say. But fifth stage of life is done by some of the greatest saints and rapturous saints and mystics and yogis in human history. Look at Ramakrishna, in pictures of him going into ecstasy. Look at, there's Rangabahut's penetrating eyes. There's these great yogis that they're not living it as a state.
Right.
They're living in God with the body opened up.
And the belly full.
And the belly full,
Right.
for the most part.
For the most part, right. And it depends. Not everybody who is a yogi has great powers, right? We're talking about a realization, an understanding, a sense.
A developed state where where the stability of love opens not only the lower body in saintly harmonies, but the upper evolutionary portions of the body-mind are open to God. And there's a host of experiences that this engenders. The golden rain, the nectars of the nervous system. Adi Da points out that usually our nervous system and endocrine system is oriented to the lower life, which is flight or fight. So you always have these adrenal responses, and you have all these stress chemistries. He says, but when all that is harmonized, then there's another secretion. There's actually another secretion that the endocrine system starts to secrete. That is soma. He says, this is the true soma. And the nectars of so when the fifth stage develops, then the body, mind, being, self, person starts to enjoy the nervous system and the endocrine system in its nectars.
And then you get into the immortal nectar of the drip, or the throat, in the back of the throat, the drip of the eternal nectars.
Which Adi Da points out is the brain core pineal gland. Instead of secreting things relative to keeping you alive from the lion eating you, or somebody else going to come after you in a fight, all that's relaxed, and then there's a secretion from there, and it drips down into the throat. There's many elaborations and effects of the body, mind, heart rested in divine. Because this is the divine condition. This is bliss. And when the maturity of the body mind can rest in that, so that the upper portions are also available to divine openness. Mm-hmm. That is the fifth stage of life, not fifth stage experiences. Mm-hmm. Not just the reflections, not a piece of it that you could run up and steal or masturbate. It is life in God.
And that's what Adi Da speaks about. He's saying that this is a conditional and a temporary stage of evolution.
In God.
In God, or in the mystery, or
bliss.
in truth, or
in bliss,
bliss, or in what is
the real condition.
The real condition, which is always occurring within a greater context, if you will.
Right, that's why it calls ecstasy.
Right.
So ecstasy means to stand out, meaning stand out of your usual orientation, body, mind. You stand out of that and you stand in God. So the ecstasy to ecstasy. And you stand in His presence, stand in His grace, stand in His transmission. Let us stand always in His blessing, presently. And you will stand in God, ecstasy.
And so, to finish tonight, I think we've basically covered the fifth stage in a general sense. I want to refer you again to the literature on the Beezone, which has a whole
host of
stuff on all of the 7 stages, but particularly the 5th stage.
And in your traditional articles, you have a plethora of 5th stage examples.
Right. And so, again, we want to thank you for giving your time and attention to our educational series. And stay tuned. We will be back again shortly with the next 6th stage part of our 7th-stage teaching on the teachings of Adi Da.
May we live in the constant blessing, transmission, presence, grace of Adi Da, the presence of God. Da.
Blessings to you.